have a question. What is your favorite song and how do you connect with it? Is it when you fell in love or through something really difficult? I'm your host, Tiffany Mason. Now join me as I interview others and we take a walk down memory lane with them. Let's get lost in why that music matters to them. Turn up your radio and let's explore Memories with a Beat. Hello, Podcast Land. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Memories with a Beat. And today I have with me SJ. And SJ, if you wouldn't mind, do you want to pronounce your last name for my audience before I butcher it?
Of course. It is pronounced 4 syllables phonetically as Barakony. So the Y is actually a pretty strong E.
Okay.
So there you go. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
No problem. SJ, if you wouldn't mind, tell my audience a little bit about yourself. I know we were introduced through a networking mutual acquaintance that we have, but tell my audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you are, that kind of stuff.
Of course. I born and raised and still live in the state of Ohio, which, if any of your audience is outside of American shores, that is in the Midwest. And if you have ever heard of Ohio State University or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, those are 2 landmarks that I think most people in most countries around the world would recognize. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is tied to where I was born and raised outside of Cleveland.
Okay.
And Ohio State University is in downtown Columbus, which is about 45, 50 minutes, somewhere around there from where I reside as of this recording.
Okay.
So I like to say that if you don't know who you are as an individual, and you don't know why you're doing whatever you're pursuing professionally, you're missing 2 very, very important building blocks. It's sort of like building an erector set or a Lego house or something, or a house of cards, using playing cards. Maybe I'm showing my age with this stuff.
No.
And it collapses because you don't have all of the foundational pieces. So I am going to answer your question by putting a little bit of flavor into who and why.
Okay.
So who is SJ? Well, first of all, I probably should back up a step and say SJ is my name. I get people who want to put in punctuation and spaces and they forget to ask me first, or they forget. So there's nothing to be put in there. SJ is my name.
Okay.
So who am I? Well, besides having a very unique name, you won't have any problem finding me in a directory. When there used to be yellow pages and such, if I would have been in there, and maybe I was, I don't remember. I'm not going to be mixed in with the Joneses or the Smiths, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That's my mom's maiden name is Jones.
Yes. And I can only imagine Tiffany if her first name was like Mary or something, or...
It's Kathy.
Right. Kathy's still pretty typical too, or Sue
Common.
Or Susan or Ann or something. Ann Jones. There's probably a zillion of them, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the first thing about who I am, is that distinguishes me.
Yeah. Is it a family name?
The Barakony is, it is all Hungarian. And as for SJ, my understanding, and I really never cared a whole lot about it because, well, 2 reasons I didn't care a lot about the origin of the first. Number one is stood out in a unique way. So, so that helps, especially when you're in a schooling system which encourages conformity, right? So that was the first reason I didn't really get, and then the second reason was I had other things on my mind as I was growing up, and it just wasn't something that prompted me to ask questions. I asked questions about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Asked my mother. But that was not one of the things I asked about. I believe there's also some ties there to my Hungarian heritage, which I'm half Hungarian, but that's all I know. And I really haven't pushed up, no ancestry.com or any of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So, okay. So moving on, a couple more things about who I am. I am driven by both history and by the future. So I like to say it really makes me unique professionally and in some respects personally, because I deeply appreciate history.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not one of those people that goes, boring, or
Mm-hmm.
has absolutely no idea about something that happened in the past. I really, really do enjoy it. But I, at the same time, over the last 5 or so years especially, I've really rounded myself out professionally as a futurist. So here I am in the present. We're recording in the summer of 2022. I can look to the past, look to the future with equal interest. Also, I believe that true leadership has pretty much nothing to do with titles, with perks, privilege, power, authority, that kind of stuff. So that defines who I am. I believe in the mantra of serve, solve, share. So that is a mantra of mine, and I've been using that now for a while. Now, why am I pursuing what I'm about to share in a few minutes? I'm pursuing it because, number one, in my educational work, I look back at my own experience in the system and I realize that like 90+%, I would say 90% is the floor, and it could even be as high as 97, 98, depending on how you slice and dice these subjective measures. I had an average, mediocre, or below experience in the conventional classrooms.
Yep. Unfortunately, a lot of kids do.
Exactly. So I can pinpoint 3 times in all 3 levels of primary and secondary school. So elementary years, middle school, and high school years. I can pinpoint 3 things. We probably won't get to it today, but it's okay. This is part of my story I've talked about in other podcasts, where I was personally bullied. Okay. So why am I doing this? Is I want to see I heard a talk over 10 years ago by a gentleman who became a mentor to me, even though I've only barely talked to him in person. He made a talk and he shared that there are several deep things that can motivate someone professionally. And this goes way, 2, 3, 4 levels below the surface. And one of them is a concept called free the captives.
Okay.
So I have adopted that. That's part of my why. Is I was a captive in the system, and I don't want to see. I cannot free all the captives. I cannot unlock all of the cage doors myself. But even if I take a couple down and chop them down and let people be free, how they're meant to be, that is part of my serve, solve, share, and it's a part of why I'm in business, at least in the educational space. I also am a huge believer in entrepreneurship because I had some of this planted in my life earlier on. My father ran a venture for almost 20 years himself. And then he introduced me to some of his friends who were in business. And then as I got more knowledgeable about the world, I realized that, with all respect to those who work for others, it's just not my destiny to do it. Okay, I did it for about 15 years of my life, and I would say probably about 10 to 12 of those, I was very dissatisfied. So there's, again, free the captives in a different context. The third why, and then we'll cap off with this, and then I'll get a little bit into the what is the third reason for your audience that I am doing what I'm doing, is I believe in building of community, of movements, of tribes, things that are based in social capital, bringing people together in peace and harmony, in a spirit of collaboration and partnership, rather than finding ways to tear us apart. Okay? A movement, a tribe, a community, or if you want to go back further in time, remember I am a historian. Sir Edmund Burke, he talked about little platoons. And de Tocqueville talked about the town meeting being the centerpiece of America in the 1840s. So bottom line is, that is what, in many respects, and even again for any listeners, subscribers outside the country, should be able to identify with, is that's something that we've been missing, is societal glue. And I believe glue comes from building bottom up connections with other people that are not done from the top down and are coercive and compulsive, which is what schooling tends to be, but they are based upon people finding common ground. And that is, again, part of my why, and it also defines who I am. So there's that. Okay. So briefly on the what, and keeping in mind everything I said and how and why, that is, again, informs everything else. So what? Educationally, I work outside of the conventional system for the most part. I will happily talk with private institutions, colleges, universities, trade schools, micro schools, things like that. But that's about the extent. I pretty much otherwise 90% of my time, 95% of my time is outside of that. And I refer to myself colloquially, and I've adopted this as my brand, as the education Sherpa.
Okay, I love that.
So I am a guide. I am guiding people up the mountain of educational awareness, consciousness, and the fact that we are in an environment now which is ripe for brand new approaches to how do we learn and how do we become better people. It is not the same old stuff that you probably remember, whether you were bullied like me 3 times or not. Maybe you were the exact opposite and coasted through the system. Maybe you were the bully. Whatever you were, that is the key here, is we all need a guide in life for various things. And under that umbrella, I do offer 4 what I refer to as hashtag Sherpa solutions. Okay. The other thing I'm involved in is the startup space, people who are starting up new ventures. As you can attest, Tiffany, I introduced you to one of my solid connections in that space recently.
Yeah.
So I have a contract to help startups to present their idea in front of an audience, which is a lot less intimidating than the Shark Tank audience.
I can imagine.
Yes, exactly. Because these people are not judges. They're just people who are coming to the event.
Yeah.
And they might end up being your client. They may end up being your customer. They might end up being your cheerleader. They might end up being your connector. Who knows? So that is my second thing at a treetop level. Third, I help a family business out. They've been around and they're in their 15th year, and they are offering small micro businesses, self-employed people, side hustlers, an opportunity to build those social capital relationships. There are tons and tons of networking opportunities out there. And that is not just to disparage or to marginalize any of them. But here is where I believe the serve, solve, share mantra applies, is in this particular self-employed venture where I put some hours in every week. I am helping to connect people. I am serving them, and I am listening very intently to what they're asking for so their venture, whatever it is, can get to another plane, another level. So I am essentially a concierge for those who understand that concept, especially in the hospitality industry. So that is my third venture. And then last but not least, this doesn't really fit in the other 3, I will take on independent contracts and what I would refer to as ambassadorships or referral arrangements. So any of those 3, independent, freelance, I'll take on contracts or opportunities to where if I can leverage my gifts at bringing people together in peace, harmony, and collaboration, if they end up doing business together, I appreciate getting a portion of whatever they agree to.
Sure.
So fill in a blank. Let's just come up with a real simple number. If they do a business for $100, who knows? If I can get 5, 10, 15, 20 bucks out of it, I save them the time to bring them together, right? So that's leveraging my ability. So bringing that to the marketplace. So again, any of those contracts are meant to serve entrepreneurially minded people or those who are on the cusp of it because of the great resignation or reflection which is going on at the time of this recording. So I know that's a lot of stuff, but I hope I presented it in blocks where it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think you did.
So thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. But I think if my audience is wise, they would stop, rewind, or go back. I guess we don't rewind anymore, but go back and listen to that again, because there's so many good things in there. I love that you're really encouraging people to, think outside the box or look for additional opportunities. And some people are getting started and they're like, well, what's the next step? So it's great that, you can kind of hold their hand and help them out. And I read an amazing book about climbing Mount Everest, and they have all kinds of Sherpas on Mount Everest to help, guide people through the climb. And so I just think that that's such a great metaphor for what you're doing, guiding people and being their assistant and showing them the ropes, because a lot of that stuff is hard to maneuvers coming to my mind, but that's not the right word I'm looking for. But anyways, to work through to figure out, where you're supposed to be. So I think those are all great, really humanitarian kind of projects.
Well, and that's the thing here is, and this is something that maybe your audience may come across. And this is where this line is a little bit fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I step on the other side of it because it's not an electrified fence. Okay. I'm not getting is altruism versus a little bit of self-interest.
Of course.
You have to have some self-interest because in a world that we live in, for better or for worse, people do have to look out for themselves. And to be totally frank, it's been that way for millennia. Okay.
Yep.
Depending on whether you believe in a strictly biblical approach to history or whether you believe in the Big Bang or anything in the middle, millennia or maybe even millions of years or wherever you fall in that, and I leave that to you for your own discretion. But bottom line is we've always had to have some element of self-interest. So when you have a serve, solve, share mentality, you're involved in 4 different ventures, if you will. Basically, in some ways, I'm a matchmaker. I can match people up to a lot of different ways I can serve them, help them. But with that being said, is you have to watch that line between altruism. You don't want to give away everything, but you do have to show people that I'm willing to trust myself to give up something that seems valuable that I should immediately be charging for. But if I don't show that kind of forward intent, they might think that I am way too self-interested, and then that's where the scale tips too far the other way. So thank you for the kind words, and hopefully that little framing device will also help, especially if you're not in business yet, because when you're not in business yet, you have to go through a shift. I went full-time self-employed in early 2015, literally the first week of that year. And imagine how it felt after about 15 years of being paid by someone else. There was no direct deposit. There was no email saying, here's your stub, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
That is where you have to cut that cord, and you might have to be a little more self-interested in the beginning, but you still have to have some element of altruism. And like I say, you're walking that fuzzy line. So again, hopefully that also helps.
Yeah.
Hey, Podcast Land. Wouldn't it be great if you could save time by being able to reply to text, email, and social media messaging all from one place instead of switching between apps? Or better yet, the system replies for you? I didn't know it existed until I started using Follow-Up Speed. I'm going to tell you a little bit more, but first, pen and paper. Go grab them. It's okay. I'll wait. Okay, now, text details to 904-560-5597. Don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. But don't you wish remembering to follow up was just a little bit easier? With Follow-Up Speed, you can set an automation and forget about it. The system does the rest of the work. Before you know it, leads will be in your inbox from the system doing your following up for you. You can also earmark contacts as they enter the system with tags, making it easier to find them later, like watched webinar, or attended Zoom call, or met at chamber. Follow-Up Speed can do all of that. I know it's hard to wrap your brain around, but it's this detailed system that acts like a CRM, project management, and your all-around hub for all communication, including but not limited to following up. Just text details to 904-560-5597 and see it in action for yourself. Now, back to the show.
Well, I'm wondering if any of this ties into the song that you've chosen. So if you don't mind, I think we're going to switch modes and talk about, I don't want to give it away, but I want to, okay, I'm going to let you take over. You talk about the song, tell us how you connect to the song, and we'll go from there. Otherwise, I'm going to give it away.
Well, so offline, off recording, whatever you want to call it, we discuss 5 possibilities. So the one I chose, though, drum roll, please. Unfortunately, I don't have any musical equipment. Is Getting Strong Now, which for those who are not of a certain generation, you might not be clear, but that was the original Rocky from the mid-70s theme song.
Yes.
So that's what we settled on.
I love it. I'm so excited. Now, I think let's jump to the future and then we'll come back to this. Let's talk about, you were saying that this is kind of a timely pick. Do you want to share with the audience, how you feel like that is relating to being a timely pick, futuristically speaking?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me bring in a little pop culture for the current era, since, again, we're recording this in mid-2020 in the summer. Later on this year, the 9th movie overall in the series, Creed 3, is being released in theaters. And for the first time ever, going all the way back to 1976, which, here's a little sidebar, quick jump into the past, that was America's bicentennial, okay? So for the first time, Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa will not be in this movie.
So sad.
So that is the first thing from the future, because the movie will be released, I think it's in November. Check your favorite search engine. But I believe it's right around Thanksgiving, if I remember right. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the first thing in the future, because as we're recording this, that is the future still. Okay. But now let's define it a little more in the future. I believe the timeless value of Getting Strong Now is the fact that we all will have and continue to be in valleys in our life, professionally and personally. And of course, they overlap in a Venn diagram. So when you're in a valley, what I learned from one of the books that I read many a year ago, I think I read this book maybe 10 years ago. The book is entitled Peaks and Valleys. I think it was Spencer Johnson off the top of my head. He said, whenever you are in a valley, continue to prepare or have the mindset for the next peak. What are you going to need to get up it? Henceforth, there's the Sherpa. See how the tie-in? Okay.
Yes, I love it.
And then when you're on the peak, don't get filled with hubris, with arrogance, condensation, assumption, those kind of things, elitism, and be prepared that there's probably going to be another valley. So Getting Strong Now says that when you are getting strong to climb the peak from the valley, you need to have strength in different ways. And I'm not necessarily, if not at all, talking about physical strength. I'm talking about emotional strength, mental strength, cultural, socio strength, meaning your network, going back to social capital, financial strength. These are the 4 phases of strength that I believe Getting Strong Now is when you apply it in a future context, because you're going to be eventually going back up the peak. And then eventually you're going to have to get strong now, because another thing that I learned, and I don't know who the original attribution is, Tiffany, but it goes something like this. You want thick skin and a soft heart instead of a hard heart and thin skin. Okay?
Very
so
true.
Getting Strong Now applies in that context, because let's say you're back in the valley, or you're still in the valley preparing for that peak, is you have to get strong. And again, going through those four again: financially, sociocultural, mentally, and emotionally. Notice I'm not even mentioning the physical thing, because we're using this in a simile, in a metaphor, in a metaphorical, physical way here. We're not even talking about, pumping iron or anything like what was in the movie and all those training montages, right? Because
Right.
if you are a boomer, or if you're a Gen Xer like me, or I'm sure some of the millennials are aware of this, especially due to the previous two Creed movies, you'll be thinking immediately about how Adonis Creed, or how Rocky himself prior to that, were constantly strengthening themselves up. I mean, there was an article that came out recently that said that Rocky, Stallone in Rocky 3, which is way back in 82, he was on a diet that literally took his body fat down to 3%, which is way less than it should be. So notice that I am pulling out the physical part of getting strong now completely, because there's plenty of that in the movies to use for your going to the gym stuff, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's not important. I'm just saying let's now look through different framing devices. So there's my futurist answer to the song's value.
Yeah, well, and within those 4 points, I'm thinking that you watch him through the movie and he is mentally also training. But you're right that I think we maybe do it, but we don't realize that we're doing it. But in the moments of the good times, save some of that so that when you start to go back down that valley, you have it there. And that's also why everybody says, you need your tribe or you need your people. And that's that social aspect that you're speaking about. And I think it's so important because that is what gets us through those valleys, and definitely being mentally tough. And a Sherpa also has to work with mentally tough people, because in that book that I read about climbing Mount Everest, first of all, it can be very defeating to go from one camp, either base camp to camp 1 or, 4 to 5. And you get up there and realize you have to go back down because you're not strong enough yet. Your body's not acclimated enough yet. So there is a lot of mental building, even in the Sherpa realm of, climbing the mountain and having to be mentally tough, and then having your tribe there too. You go onto that mountain with a group of people. It's not a solo mission. So there's a lot wrapping into that as well that I'm noticing similarities.
Well, I've read 3 of Jim Collins's books, and I think he's written 4. There might be one that I'm not thinking of. And in one of the books, and I want to say it was in Great by Choice, off the top of my head, he cites Ernest Shackelford and an expedition, if I remember right, to the South Pole. I'm pretty sure it was the South Pole, Antarctica, instead of the Arctic. Okay. And again, I'm not searching for anything or anything like that. I'm just pulling stuff out to tie this together. But think about what it took in the context of a sociocultural to bring all these people into what is a very dangerous mission. It would still be today with all the technology we have, let alone he did this over a century ago. Okay. And I still remember something that was referred to, and I'm pretty sure it was in the book, or it may have been in another article or something I read. But he advertised being on his expedition team, and he came out and flat out said, "You may not make it back." But guess what? Did some not make it back? Yes, but some did. And here we are, at least me, and I'm hoping some other thought leaders and such out there are talking about this too. Those who made it back, they're still being talked about in some context all these years later, right? So there's your sociocultural getting strong now, right? In that now we're doing historical. Notice how I shifted. Also, if you think about, let's go back to the earlier Rocky movies. And again, now I'm going to be speaking to those in your audience who are boomers especially, or maybe Xers like me. In the original movies, taking on Apollo Creed, who, of course, for the millennials and such, is Adonis's father, okay? He needed a team to support him. He needed Sherpas, if you will.
Yep.
Who was his number one Sherpa, his number one confidant until, unfortunately, and I don't want to spoil it, but by now, if you haven't, you still can watch how it happened. In the third movie, the guy passes away. It was Mickey Goldmill, okay?
Mm-hmm.
His trainer. His trainer was hard on him. And that might not work for everyone. In fact, that wouldn't work for me. But again, he needed it, though, and it worked for him, for Rocky. Okay, and in some respects, Adonis looked to Rocky in the first two Creed movies in that same way. There was a lot of mirroring effect of Rocky and Mickey to Adonis and Rocky. So look at it this way. The mental strongness, the sociocultural, and the emotional all were happening in those mentor to mentee type relationships. The only one that I don't think we hit from my original four was the financial, but in the third movie, and actually also in the fifth movie, which is the one that's least regarded, but in the third and the fifth movie, there's reference to the financial piece. Because in the third movie, he had made all this money and was buying all this stuff, but he lost his edge. And Clubber Lang did something that, again, I know I'm spoiling a little bit, so maybe I should have said spoilers. But Clubber absolutely mauled him because he had lost his edge, his financial edge. Getting strong now, he had forgotten it. And then in the fifth movie, unfortunately, he has to almost go back to the very beginning. But that is where all four of these phases of this song comes in. And now notice, like I said, for your audience, I shifted from that future back to the historical context. And there is a present context, but we will get there. That is a few thoughts that, again, looking at this song as more than just a song, it is it is an incredible song. However, there's a lot more that you can unpack and unravel from it. And hopefully this will help those who will be listening to this in the future.
Yeah. Are there any specific lines from the song that stick out to you, any of the lyrics that maybe you cling to or you think of in your mind, or is it really just that theme music that we're all used to? What part sticks out for you in the song?
Just this is where the limbic part of your brain, which is all emotion and images, completely is different from that neocortex, which is where your logic is, your words and everything, the rationality. To be totally frank, I am pure limbic on this song. I don't really hear, the only words I hear is that constant drumbeat of getting strong now. Okay. So that's how it hits me. And again, we'll use a term that some might be familiar with. It hits me in the feels. Okay. So that is me. And a great book, by the way, to read to understand the difference between the two parts of the brain. And there's others, but this is my favorite. And again, I read this one years ago. It's called The Ant and the Elephant. It's got like a yellowish color. And it was written by a former Olympian. And he talks about,
interesting.
He talks in there about how some of the greatest athletes and others are so in touch with their limbic. They literally go through their routines hundreds, if not thousands of times in their mind before they do it. And that is what a lot of society does not do. They don't strengthen their mental side, because you can be the best athlete. And it goes back to that physical thing I said a few minutes ago. If you don't have the strong mental, especially understanding now, if I add this little additional yarn to this unraveling, you're thinking, wow, someone did a routine this many times in their mind. Yes, and it does work. And you don't have to use those percentages that you hear about in the professional personal development spheres, 2%, 3%, whatever. Why can't we expand it to 10, 15, 25%? There's no reason we can't. It's just we, unfortunately, and this goes back to my work as the education Sherpa, we have a very archaic system that we have to free the captives from. We either free the captives while they're still in the metaphorical prison, or we free them afterwards by filling in what they missed, or we bypass the entire system and come up with something better. So,
yeah.
But anyway, that's the answer to your question, but also adding again some more color to this, because again, this song has so many meanings to me, as you can tell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I also wonder, I know Rocky is just a movie, but we all have to imagine that he's envisioned this fight, in his mind, and how he's going to take a left hook, or how he's going to, block another. Yes, right. Sorry. SJ is punching forward. And so I'm agreeing, and I forget you guys can't see that. So the other thing that is interesting about what you were speaking with the swimmers and, repeating their routine in their mind is that I have a podcast that I edit, and it is about meditation. And then I just personally have been doing more meditation. And I think that's one way that we do get our minds stronger. And part of meditation can be a guided meditation where somebody walks you through something. So that could be like them walking you through what that meat is going to be like, or whatever. But the more that our brain visualizes it, our body accepts it like a memory almost. And so your body will start to gravitate towards that. Or, you've heard of, like, if you want more happiness, think about happiness, because your body or your brain will attract to that. And it's the same idea where if you're, going through climbing the mountain, or, you got a big fight coming up, or a big swim meet, whatever that is, I think that that's probably a smart practice to have that go over and over again in your mind. But one of the things is mentally getting stronger.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And there's different ways to do it. And that's the beauty of this, is I won't come across, because I don't offer any coaching in any of my ventures. My natural personality type is that of being a facilitator, a mentor, like the Rocky Adonis and the Mickey Rocky approach, or a Sherpa type advisor. That's just the way that I am wired, right? Metaphorically, metaphysically wired, right? But maybe you're in the audience and you are in a more of a coaching practice, or you respond better to coaching, and that's fantastic, right? We're at the time of this recording, we're also gearing up for those who are fans. If you're not, don't worry about it. You're not missing anything. But if you are, we're gearing up for what is called American football, not to be confused with the world calls football, right?
Yes.
Well, in that sport, there's coaches upon coaches upon coaches. There's head coaches, assistant coaches, strength coaches, mental coaches, fitness coaches, and that's great, right? Some people need that. As a quick fun aside, I just actually had a conversation a few days ago before this recording with a gentleman, but he told me that he was actually a star football player's mindset coach for over 6 months.
Oh, wow.
See? So I now have a connection who has a connection to a very, very well-known football player. And guess what? That's the mental piece of getting strong now. And notice what I just did again. Quietly, we're now in the present. Because, may I indulge your audience in the present, or did you have any other questions you wanted to ask? I can hit that last phase now if you'd like.
I just, if your connection with it is really one of an emotional one, I understand that. Some people, like myself, I'm really connected to the lyrics and the story, and I want to, that takes me somewhere. And other people, my husband is very much like you, where he just likes the sound of the music, or it will evoke an emotion. So I can appreciate, both sides of that coin. And so that's perfectly fine. I just love that. You're bringing it up. It's just a good childhood memory kind of song.
It is.
And then the fact that it just keeps going with the last Creed one I watched was actually on an airplane. And so then that would bring me to now, with this movie coming out. So I'm excited to see it.
Absolutely. And look at it this way. I think this movie happens to be coming out at a very good time for people. Or let's use one quick sidebar, because I don't want to get too many more sidebars, but one more quick one I think applies as we frame this song in the present to wrap this up from all future, past, present. It's almost like we did Back to the Future here. Top Gun. Maverick just came out, okay? That
Oh,
movie
shit.
has
Yeah.
gotten you near universal acclaim because of the way it made people feel.
Oh, for
Okay,
sure. I've seen it
there you
twice,
go.
and I would go see it a third time.
See,
I feel addicted to it, and it's something with the feeling.
and I think when people will continue to look back on it, I think it's going to, in some ways, and this might be a little bit of a stretch now, and I promise we will get back to Rocky in a minute, but I think there's some parallel here. I think in some ways this has potential 40 years literally to the year later, 82 to 2022, to be the adult version of what E.T. was to kids.
Mm.
E.T. made kids feel wondrous. It made them feel like when they were being curious and creative and being open to experiences, that was a good thing. Okay? I think there's potential here for Top Gun Maverick and then Creed 3 coming out later in the year for either or both of those, depending on who you are as a person. So again, going back to how I first started this podcast, talking about who and why I am, right? Do the same with yourself. Maybe you flock more to the Top Gun Maverick. Maybe you'll flock more to Creed 3, maybe to both. There's an outside chance maybe neither of them will hit you in the feels, and that's fine. But in the present, we have been through so much as a global citizenry, let alone as we break it into our respective countries and nation states. In my reasoned view, we need to be back in touch with what gets us, and again, I'm going to step on this metaphor again because it's that important. What's going to get us back up to peak and also get us all four of those phases so when we do eventually hit some sort of a valley again, we're much better prepared. Because this past one, I don't know if we were as prepared as we should have been. But then again, I don't think anyone expected what happened either. So there's two sides to that proverbial coin. However, we need this. We need to bring people together again. Okay, Top Gun Maverick brought people together again. It brought the late boomers, the Xers together with the millennials and the Zoomers who were usually going with them to the theater, right?
Well, and I love that you're bringing that up because I went with my niece. And she was one that really, 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 really wanted to see it, wanted to show her friend the movie because she had seen it once. And so I love that you're bringing that up because that's absolutely right. And I also love that you're right, that we've been through a lot and it just feels good to feel good.
Exactly. And I truly think that we're going to see this again later in the year. Maybe I don't expect Creed 3 to be $1 billion movie because while Michael Jordan, not to be confused with the basketball player, but while Michael Jordan is well regarded in Hollywood, he's still not 40 plus years into his career like Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah.
And also, too, Top Gun Maverick, I think, was delayed like 4 times. So people just like, would you please get this movie out already, right? You know, and there's all that pent-up demand from being basically locked in our homes. So with that said, though, I'm drawing a parallel between two movies only because it's the present. And I am saying to you, I'm challenging your audience. I am suggesting to you, Tiffany, and I'm also talking to myself out loud. Mental strength, emotional, social and cultural by building people up around you, edification, empowerment, positive energy, encouragement. And lastly, the fiscal, monetary, because again, right now as we're recording, I'm not going to linger on this, but we are going through the worst inflation since I was less than 5 years old myself. So it's eroding people's ability to do basic things, right? So this is where you step up to the plate and say, I'm not going to depend on the people who claim to be looking after me, whatever those people's titles are is irrelevant. I'm going to take care of myself and my family. This is where the self-interest will kick in, but then do it and wrap it immediately in adding value to the marketplace. This is where the altruism piece comes in. So you're now balancing it out. You're saying enough's enough. I'm not waiting on those people to take care of me. Because they have, for all respects, and I'm not here throwing exact individuals under buses. That's not how I am. But I'm just saying the general system has failed you. So time to step up, time to get strong now, and time to take care of that fiscal, monetary piece while keeping the others in mind And that is the present day way to look at this song.
I love that. I could not have said it better myself. You are 1,000% right. Well, we all went into, we all lost our minds because we weren't mentally strong enough. Some people didn't have their tribe together, didn't have money, put aside, or weren't financially strong, or because you weren't mentally strong, you pulled your investments, which worked against you too. So there's just a lot of aftermath that I think my inside my brain, it's like like the explosions are happening left and right, because you're right about a lot of things. So I love the truth that you're speaking, and I love that you're encouraging everybody to be self-sufficient in those areas, and rightfully so, with the purpose or motivation that you're putting back into the society as well. It's not just take. So I love that.
Exactly. You're going to hear a lot of the people who have a de facto tie to the existing way of doing things. They're going to keep talking about things that they know well, because what is that old mantra? And again, for those who are boomers, you'll remember Mike Brady. Wherever you go, there you are. So this one sounds really silly, but it's like they only know what they know. And you hear that and you say, that sounds really silly, SJ, But guess what? There's a lot of truth to that, because the blind spots, the blinders, you don't see that blind spot in your mirror, right? Or you don't know how to look back while also looking forward. You don't know how the balancing or whatever is. But here's how you have to look at this. You don't have to sacrifice your ability for some self-interest to take care of yourself and be independent. You can still be interdependent, which is that next level up, by having the tribes, communities, and the grassroots movements. Mm-hmm. But then you have to say, okay, so these people who don't know what they don't know, they're going to keep talking about things that they know very well, and they are invested in the way it is. So they're going to say consume, buy. But it's like, you know what? It's now time to look at producing. Produce. Value. Solution provider. That is where I think the undiscovered country, the horizon, thinking again back to the future, pun literally intended here, is you can be self-interested with that overlay, and then you can weave in some altruism without crossing over that line that we discussed earlier. So that's sort of a way, I guess, in one respect, that we can sort of cap this off to some degree.
Yeah. Yep. I completely agree with you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to, discuss this song, but also, really bring some pretty awesome things to light. So I really appreciate and enjoyed this conversation.
Well, I appreciate the very kind invite. Very grateful. And I look forward to being able to promote this and share it once it's available for public listening.
No problem at all. I'm excited too, SJ. I'm excited to have you back. You guys, he threw out a lot of nuggets throughout the interview, and I try to take really good notes. When I go through editing, I'll take more notes and definitely make sure that they end up in the show notes for you guys. And then, of course, if you want to hear the song, we've got it on the Spotify playlist, Apple Music, and YouTube. So I encourage you guys to check out the music and wait with bated breath for that Creed 3 to come out, hopefully in November. And I just hope everybody has a great day. Podcast Land, I hope that this episode was music to your ears. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? You never know what rabbit holes we'll get to go down and explore. Were you reminded of anything? Or anyone? Share what it was with me in a review. Honestly, the reviews don't do me any favors other than knowing people like you are listening to this podcast. Insert cheesy wink. However, the ratings do help, so leave me 5 stars. You know you wanna. This podcast was produced by Virtual You, supporting you in all things podcasting. To connect or check me out on social media, I know you're just gonna stalk me. But see the show notes, as always, for details. Can't wait to dive into my next guest's memories with a beat. Hit subscribe now. You don't want to miss the next episode.